Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about user experience design or human computer interaction or human centered computing or whatever you want to call it. Over the last year, I've taken both a Google professional certification in user experience design as well as a graduate level course on user experience design. I wanted to take a minute to share some of the lessons I learned from there. Some things I already kind of knew, but maybe I can speak more intelligently on now, and how they can help you in a wide variety of careers. Now, to start with, I'm going to give you kind of some a brief explanation of what user experience design is. So, for those of you who may be deciding on a career choice, or maybe you're thinking about changing careers and you are thinking about maybe something along those lines, hopefully this can help you. So user experience design can be in a bunch of different fields. It can be a bunch of different areas, but the main goal here, right? The main point is to research what users want. This can be done by, if you are just a researcher and that's all you do, you might just be doing user interviews, talking with people, designing surveys, reading papers and things research has been conducted in that particular field, looking at what other competitors are doing, directly competing with whatever you're designing and indirectly competing with whatever you're designing, and kind of getting an idea of the space that you're hoping to launch your product in. Now, once you've kind of have an understanding of what your clients want, what your users want, as well as what's being made, what's out there, and kind of the gaps in that, then obviously you would go ahead and try to ideate or think about how you would design it. This could be done in a bunch of different ways, but in the end goal, you'll have a kind of like a first prototype that you'll flesh out, you'll iterate, you'll make better until eventually you have a finalized design that you would eventually send out into the world. Big important thing there is that you redo the designs. You constantly are iterating through it. By iterating, I just mean designing it multiple times, making it better every time. So, you do it the first round, you give it to some people, you let them see what they think, you ask them questions, you go back, you improve it, you re-review your research you did, you go back and you improve it. So making something quickly, then usually it's simpler, and then you make it more and more complex as you go. But having something that someone could test at the end each phase or cycle, and your cycles can be different depending on how large of a project you're doing or whatever. Now that we have a basic understanding of the process, I'm going to talk more about what I thought was really useful for it. So the first thing is this idea of empathy. And empathy comes on early, comes on in the research step, it comes on understanding the user. And what I mean by empathy is trying to understand things from someone's point of view. And obviously, this is important to any sort of job, even just in conversation, right? I think it's very important to try to understand what someone means by the words they are saying. I know I, for example, don't have the best grammar, right? Although many people may be very kind and say that I explain things well, I do have a way of speaking that, being from the South, I use a lot of slang terminology and things. I don't have the clearest way of speaking. I understand that. But people, if they can understand what you mean, doesn't really matter the words you use to get there. So someone might be trying to explain something to you or convey a message or thought to you, and they might use words that conjure a certain image to you, but it might not be the sort of image they're hoping to conjure. So take the time to you ask follow-up questions. Really try to understand what they mean by that, because especially a more complex word may mean something to you that it doesn't mean to other people. Like when I use the word cycles, right? Or phases when I was talking about improving earlier, redesigning, iterating, right? A phase might mean something completely different to different people. The amount of time a phase might be would depend on your experience. The amount of time a cycle might be, or if it even is a time at all. Do I mean phases as in the phases of the moon? Do I mean phases as in the phases of Magic the Gathering card game? What, your life experience will change the meaning of those words. But what I meant with by the word phase was a period of time. And are any of those other meanings invalid? No. I mean, they all mean the same thing, right? They all phase could be used in any of those contexts and be correct. And that's an example of language kind of failing to convey the ideas we want. I think a very famous example of that is words that we have in other languages that we don't have in English, like Schreidensfreude. I think I pronounced that correctly, or laughing at someone's misgiving or pain. The idea if you watch someone fall down, you get joy out of that. That's a German word. Or I believe this one's French. The when you look over the edge of a large cliff and you have that feeling to want to jump into the chasm or valley or whatever you're looking down into, uh, this idea that when you look into the void looks back into you. There's a word for that as well that we don't have in the English language that I'm aware of. The first big thing is try to empathize with the users. Ask them questions. If you're designing a product or if you're just, meeting with someone to do an interview, right? Ask follow-up questions. Make sure you really understand what they mean. Ask clarifiers. You'll see that in my videos a lot when I will say something and I think it might be misinterpreted, or I think maybe I didn't do a good job explaining that. I'll say things like, what I mean by that is, or I'll say, well, you're probably thinking, and then I'll say, whatever. And what I'm trying to do by that, I'm trying to frame your initial thought to be what I was trying to convey because I understood that at that second that maybe I said something that wasn't totally clear. And it might have been obvious to some of you, and it might not have been obvious to everyone. I'm a, first language speaker of this language, so I might say things in a way that people that maybe this is their third or fourth language would not initially assume because of my upbringing, or people from different areas that speak the same language might have a different way of going about saying the same thing that I said. I think a great example of that is the United Kingdom, right? The same words mean very different things in the United States or the United Kingdom. And there's regional dialects, both in the United Kingdom as well as the United States, that have differences of meanings in certain words as well. So we can't assume that all because we speak the same language that we mean the same things. And people's life experiences or their worldviews, how, you know, their experiences up until now shape their perception, can change things. So you need to take the time to really try and understand the meaning behind their words and not just the words themselves. I feel like I explained that decently well. There is an expression, walk a mile in their shoes, a very famous English expression, kind of to give you an example. And to explain why it's important to really understand the meaning behind the words and what they're getting at, I have a quote here from Henry Ford that said if you would have asked consumers what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. Obviously, Henry Ford is the founder of a very famous automotive company. And back then, automo- automobiles were not very popular. It was predominantly horses, horse-drawn carriages, and things of that nature. What people wanted back then didn't necessarily align with what they made. That's because back then automobiles weren't very good. They were kind of seen as like this rich people thing that they would have that weren't very fast, very practical. It was just kind of like a cool thing that they could have. It wasn't available to the public or widespread. It wasn't cheap enough for like everyone to have a car or anything like that yet. Okay, now that we've discussed understanding and you have the mindset that you're gonna try to understand what someone means behind the words, right? You're gonna try to empathize with them, try to see what they're trying to see or try what they're trying to tell you. We've gotten to the point where you might have a good example or understanding of what they're asking for, what they're trying to communicate with you, so that you can, determine how to respond to it. We're gonna go to the next kind of main idea, and this is an idea that I think is very helpful and more in project management. This is something that I've known for a really long time. I've used this strategy for a really long time, but I really didn't know how to describe it. I didn't really have a good catchy way of saying it, but luckily my course gave me a great one. And it's this idea of failing fast. And what do I mean by failing fast? I mean, it's important to make something quickly. whether it's a failure or not. And why? Why? Well,
Time is money, friend.
it is useful in a business setting, or any setting really, to make something quickly or to determine if something is not worth continuing quickly. And especially like in a lot of different spaces, you need to be able to figure out if something's a waste of time. You might have a client who hires you to design something, and you might do your research, and you might find that the consumers would absolutely hate whatever thing they asked you to design. What do you do? Right? Well, the responsible thing there would be to let them know that based on your user testing, give them all the numbers and all the facts that you don't think that would be good. And that would save them a bunch of money. It would save them a ton of money not spent on labor and designing that thing, even if that's not what they want to hear. And this idea that the customer is always right isn't necessarily true when you're designing something for an end user. So you might be a contractor and your customers, the company asks you to design whatever it is. But if you find that the users aren't going to buy it and use it, and you tell that to the customer and they're not willing to listen, that's on them. They want to throw their money away and have you design something that's not going to perform well. It is what it is. Now, I wouldn't be combative with your employer, right? The person who's paying you to do this. That kind of goes back to the understanding thing of trying to understand why they think that's a good idea. Maybe if you don't understand their vision, it can make it really difficult for you to do user interviews that actually drill down to what they're asking. So, something to keep in mind there. There's no like definitive answer. It's a case by case basis, and you'll have to make decisions based on the information you're given at that time. There is no one answer. But getting back to this idea of failing fast, it's been very apparent in a lot of the videos I've done that they're made rather rapidly, right? And why? Why am I not taking the time that maybe one of your larger YouTubers would take to make a video? I'm kind of, they're fairly poorly edited and they're kind of just chucked out there, right? But what I'm doing right now is I'm putting in the least amount of time to make these videos, make the content to see what will stick, right? Because if I put in an ungodly amount of time to make a video and that video doesn't do well, I've lost all that time. If I make something and YouTube doesn't like it or demonetizes it or gets rid of it, maybe it has copyright issues and it gets deleted, I've wasted all that time. But if I just make videos quickly and I test out a bunch of different things rapidly, right? I can kind of see what works, what doesn't, and then I can devote my time to those things rather than the ones that flopped. That's why a lot of these videos, especially the ones where I'm doing something that I've never done before, tend to be not the best because we're just trying it out. We're seeing if it sticks or if it doesn't. And most likely it won't. So why would you spend a bunch of time on something, invest a bunch of resources in something that people aren't going to enjoy, right? It's better just to spend a little bit of time, make a lot of things, figure out what people do want to see, and then continue to make more of that. So there's your lesson of fail fast and how you can twist it into social media. The next thing I want to talk about is ideation. And ideation is defined in what we've been working on is creating ideas. It's ways of brainstorming. Now, because of my background, most of ours have been designing interfaces for computer-based applications. So, websites, mobile apps, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, that skill of like how do you create a bunch of designs in a short period of time can be useful in a bunch of different ways. I think the method that I like to use is I like to use pen and paper when I'm trying to design something, and I will make something rapidly, and then I'll make it a completely different way, and then I'll do that quite a few times. I think usually between 4 and 8, and I'll just rapidly kind of just sketch something up real rough, block out basic things, and then I'll kind of be the building blocks that I'll use to make a prototype, or I'll show the different prototypes that on paper, the different drawings to a potential user or the client, get feedback, and then improve upon it. I never just take one of the ideas. Usually, I will steal bits from all of them because none of them are good, but together it makes something decent. And then we will refine that idea. We will iterate through multiple cycles, right? We'll change it up each time. It'll improve a little bit each time. And hopefully by the end, we have something that people would actually want to use, they would actually want to buy, and the end client is happy and I get paid. So far, I haven't had any issues not getting paid. People have been pretty happy with the work I've done. That's also because sometimes I'm straight up. I get if it goes back to the fail fast thing. If I find out rapidly that I don't think whatever they want to do is doable or there isn't a much of a market for it, I will just be straight up like, "Hey, I don't think this has much legs. You can continue to move forward with it or not. It's up to you." Now, for the sake of this video, because I'm trying to keep it very broad, I'm not going to get into any design concepts or like specifically how I would design interfaces. The whole reason that I don't want to dive further into those concepts is because I want to keep this very vague. Because I imagine I have a very small audience, and I don't imagine that based on the stuff I have been making that all of you work in, front end design for software. I think that would be really dumb of me to assume that you guys are designing web pages and web apps and all that. So I'm not going to get into all that. And I don't foresee this video doing particularly well. So I probably won't continue this in the future unless I'm very pleasantly surprised. But I just wanted to make something kind of quicker, talks about three ideas that can be used in your life. Hopefully it'll be something that's obvious to you, but maybe you haven't heard it phrased this way. And maybe going to through this new year, it's only January, you can try to implement some of this stuff. Maybe some of this will really resonate with you, and hopefully it'll improve you as a both as a professional individual, but also in your and hopefully get improved results. So thank you for watching. If you've not done so already, consider subscribing. Go ahead and drop a like and comment down below. Maybe comment what you thought was most interesting, or if you have a different take on any of these three principles, or maybe a different way of describing it, or a personal anecdote that you'd like to add to the comments below, that would be much appreciated. And thank you for watching.